Hi, my name's Robert. I come to you as an automobile enthusiast that have maintained, serviced, and repaired my own vehicles in excess of 30 years. I've had a car that lasts over 400,000 miles. The current car that I'm driving has over 220,000 miles on it. It's a 95 model. So I hope you can benefit from the information I share. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, in a few minutes here, I'm getting ready to work on pulling an alternator from a Volvo 850. I was driving yesterday and the alternator failed. The first thing I noticed was it was getting a little hard to start. Then the voltage meter dropped below 11.5. It was fluctuating. One time I drive, it was like 11 volts. The next time I drive, it was like 13 volts. That went on for a day and a half. Then last night, on my way home, I was driving along and I noticed the ABS light came on, which is rare for the 95 850s. Then the SRS light came on, and then the battery light came on, and I looked at my voltage meter. My voltage meter was under 10, and it was dropping because it was getting dark, and I had my headlights on. So your car will drive off the battery. The first thing I did was cut everything off. I turned my headlights off, drove with my parking lights. I cut my radio off, I cut my fan off, so that the only thing that was being operated by the car was the necessary electronics like fuel injection and transmission solenoid, stuff like that. I was able to drive 7-8 miles. I made it home, pulled into my parking spot with the transmission fishing for gears, and when I shut it off, tried to restart it, 10 seconds later, it was dead as a doornail. So I'm going to go ahead and replace the alternator. So let's get started. Alright, here's the tools I used to change the alternator on the Volvo 850 S70 from 93 probably all the way to 2000. I had the pan here to catch the coolant. I got 1/4-inch tools, short extension. I got 8mm, 10mm, 12mm, and 13mm deep and shallow. I got the box end, 12 and 13mm. Got the little screwdriver. I got the yellow tool that I use to pull my serpentine belt and a screw to pin it open. I got the 3/8" drives, short extension, 12 and 13mm sockets. I got that little swivel, and I got the 10mm to pull the battery loose. I got the breaker bar for the tight bolts. I got the brush to clean off the components and the water hose connections, and needle nose pliers in case I needed a little help. Then I got that other box end wrench to help me with some force. Use that as a breaker bar. Then I got the magnet in case I drop any screws. Got my knee pads when I'm crawling around on the ground. That's pretty much it. And then I got the box end wrench and the screwdriver. I use a screwdriver for tightening and loosening the heater hoses. And I got the wrench there to take loose the serpentine belt tension. That's all the tools I needed. First thing I'm going to do is take my drip pan, slide it under the radiator, and I'm going to pull the petcock through that hole there on the radiator, let the fluid coolant drain out of the radiator. I think you could do it with a deep, maybe 10 or 13, I'll tell you in a few minutes. Okay, I reached up there, I got that loose with a 13mm deep well socket. Those things are really just snugged in, so you just break it loose, open it up till you get coolant out. Now I'm going to come up here and I'm going to remove this little air vent for the computer box. I'm going to take this hose loose on top of the radiator, which should just allow a good free flow for the fluid to drain out of the radiator, the coolant. Okay, I pull the hose loose up top. Now I got a good flow of coolant. And I removed this air vent here. That was a 7mm on that hose clamp. Now I'm going to look at the bolts necessary to pull that bracket off. I'm going to try to remove this bracket first, and then I'm going to try to take the whole bracket assembly off that will pull that water pump with it. But first I'm going to go ahead and take loose the serpentine belt. Alright, this is the tool I use to get the serpentine belt loose. I slide that in the hole, then I pin it with a screw or a special pin that I have. So I'm going to go ahead and take that serpentine belt off. Okay, I have the tension off the serpentine belt. You might want to take a special note as to how this belt wraps around through there. A lot of people get confused when they put this belt back on and they can't get it on right. Say it's got all kind of slack and things like that. So pay close attention to how that belt was on there. So when you take it off, you can get it put back on there. And I've always found it's easier to take it off this smooth roller down here first, and then the rest of it just kind of unwinds easily once you get it off the smooth roller. So I got it loose here, and I'm going to go ahead and start working on getting this bracket off with the power steering pump. Okay, now that I have the coolant draining, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the battery negative cable because I don't want to get shocked messing around the alternator. So you just put a 10mm little ratchet on there, take that loose, work off the negative. You don't have to disconnect the positive, just the negative. So now the battery's disconnected, I'm going to go ahead and work on getting the bracket and stuff loose from the power steering pump. Okay, the first bolt I'm going to pull out of this power steering pump situation is the 13mm bolt there, which is the top of the alternator. I used a 13mm socket, a long extension, and a regular 3/8 inch drive. The second bolt I'm going to go after is the bolt that is right here at the tip of my magnet. You can see it all the way down there past this elbow that goes inside the manifold. On the other side, it's right below the bracket that bolts the tensioner bracket on, and it's a 12mm. So I use a 12mm deep socket. It's on pretty tight, so I'm going to put a breaker bar on there to break that loose and pull that bolt out. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is unplug the temp sensor, get that wire out of the way, and then I'm going to look for the bolt on the bottom of the alternator to get that out. I think that's holding the power steering pump bracket assembly on. Okay, now there's a bolt all the way down in the bottom of the alternator, down low, and it's real hard to get your hands past these transmission coolant lines and power steering fluid lines. So I normally pull this dipstick out. If you look down there, the dipstick mounts to the bottom of the intake manifold with one 12mm bolt. So go ahead and reach under there and take out that 12mm bolt, and then you'll have room to reach that lower alternator bolt down there. And it's a field bolt, you can't really see it. Okay, I reached down behind the alternator, found a 12mm, pulled it there. I pulled this top 12mm out here. I suspect that the alternator is totally loose and this pump bracket is totally loose. So I'm going to jerk and pull this stuff up out of the way, but I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the electrical wiring on the alternator before I try to pull it all the way out. Okay, I unwired the alternator. I had to use a needle nose pliers to pull the lower pull lead off, and you can see the plastic on it kind of deteriorated, shattered. Then I used a 13mm socket to get the bolt off the major power lead to the alternator. Then I went on ahead and removed the radiator hose the rest of the way off because I didn't want it to be in the way. Now I'm going to go ahead and try to lift that off, and I did unhook the temp sensor wire from that bracket because I didn't want to damage that pulling it out. So I'm going to go ahead and try to pull everything out, see if it comes out. As you can see, that whole assembly did come out. I didn't need to pull that pulley, so I'm probably going to put that back on while I have the motor up, while I have the bracket up and out. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab the alternator, see if it goes heads and lifts out while I'm up here. there may be another bolt in there, but yeah, I think there may be another bolt hinged in there. So let me take a close look at that and report back in a second. No, there was not another bolt in there. Down at the bottom, the way this slides over the motor here is what was making it feel like there was another bolt in there. So I just pushed and pulled and got that off. As you can see, there's kind of a washer assembly there. So I'm going to go ahead and take my core with me to the salvage yard and get the cleanest alternator I can find. Hopefully it'll be newish. Okay, we're going to go back in with the used alternator. First thing I'm going to do is go down there and align that lower bolt holes that'll go and mount the alternator against the frame. And I'm going to hook up these two electrical wires so that I can have those hooked up with the alternator in place. Okay, I got that 13mm lead bolted on and I got the other one plugged in. Now I'm going to slide the alternator in place and get it aligned where that lower bolt will go in. Okay, getting this lower bolt hole lined up is probably going to be the toughest thing. As you can see, I got the bolt started in that side. But on this side, I took a small Phillips screwdriver and I put it through the hole and I wiggled it around until I got it lined up enough to get that bolt most of the way through there. And then this top one pivots in. Now, I'm going to have to get this bracket fitted over there before I put any bolts in this so that everything can line up together, since I only pulled those 4 bolts. So I'm going to go ahead and set the water pump assembly, I'm going to call it, into place, and then I'm going to put that lower bolt in before I do anything else. Okay, just to revisit, that lower bolt is the longest of the 4 that was removed. It goes in from the driver's side and points toward the belt area, and I went on ahead and put that bolt in, and it's sticking out. Now this bracket should not interfere with that bolt. I went on ahead and screwed my newer Eiler puller on, since I pulled that from the junkyard as well. Now I can be more aggressive with sliding this into place. Okay, it appears that has been slid into place. I got this bolt up here aligned. It has a nut on it. The alternator is just about aligned in that top hole. And I'm going to go ahead and slide the bolt through this front hole and then align the other 3 up before I tighten any down. Alright, here's the deal with putting these bolts back in. The longest bolt is the one at the bottom closest to the axle that pushes from the driver's side to the passenger side where the belts are. So that's the longest one. The shortest one doesn't have a nut on it, and it's the one that goes up top, has its own bolt right there behind that vacuum tube. It pushes right below the serpentine belt tensioner and goes into the nut that's built onto the bracket. The other 2 bolts, one goes on the front and the other one goes in the top back of the alternator. You can see it wiggling there. And all 3 of the top ones have, these 2 top alternator bolts have nuts. The bottom one has a nut, and the bracket one doesn't have a nut. So if you're having a hard time figuring out which bolt goes where, you could set them down on a pattern, or you could just put them back in like that. Tighten them down. I'm going to go ahead and tighten them down and try to get this finished. On that hard to reach bolt down there, there's a little trick that you use when you got to use a box end wrench, and this is a 13mm, doesn't have much leverage. You take that box end wrench and you hook another box end wrench on the end of it, and you get more leverage with tightening and loosening. So that one in the back, you may have to use this double back box end wrench trick to get that bolt loose and tight again. Okay, I was having a little bit of a hard time tightening that last lower bolt all the way down there tight, And that's the one I believe you need to tighten first, because it doesn't have a nut on it. It actually screws in the back of that bracket that holds that idler pulley. So I tighten that one down first, then I tighten this one here, then I tighten one back there, then I tighten that one. All the nuts are 13 millimeter and the bolt heads are 12 millimeter. Now, when I was tightening that lower bolt down there, I just couldn't get my hand down there comfortable. So I pulled the oil dipstick out. Of course, the oil dipstick has a 12 millimeter bolt in it. Bolts on the bottom of that intake manifold. So you might want to go ahead and pull that so it's easier to get that. Then I went on ahead and took off the lid to the ECU panel, because just the little tip of the air intake side was getting in my way from moving my ratchet wrench. And it'll probably be easier to get my serpentine belt on with this off. So, also, when you have this bracket off, if you need to clean up the tip of your radiator thermostat housing, clean off the tip of it with this out of the way. It'll be easier than trying to clean it now with this back on. So, next thing I'm going to do is put this oil dipstick tube back on. Then I'm going to put this radiator hose on. Then I'm going to put this serpentine belt on. Then I'm going to put this cap back on here. Then I'm going to fill the system back up with coolant. And then I'm going to go ahead and start the car. I already had the alternator tested. Now, the first place I took it to have it tested was AutoZone. They said it was bad. So I just wanted to double check that. I took it to O'Reilly's. They said it was good. They tested it 2 or 3 times. Said it's putting out 14.3 volts. So this alternator is actually in better shape than the one I had on there for the last 1.5 years. So that should be it. If you have any questions, go ahead and post them. And have a great day. If you feel that this information was beneficial, please like it and share it with your social media friends. Go ahead and subscribe to my page so you will get notification of future videos that I post. You can feel free to visit my website, robertspainter.com, post questions, and thanks again for watching.